Welcome to Permission to Be Human, the podcast. I'm your host, Mel Finlater, mother, coach, and curator of Permission to Be Human, the company and community. If you're a mom, know a mom, or want to be a mom, and you crave getting out in the world to make a difference, then you're in the right place. This is a space for moms like you to connect with yourself, your purpose, and your big, audacious dreams. Because when you feel your best, you can better you, your family, and the wider world. Let's do this. Today we're speaking with Shelley Lippman, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Shelley is an author and also an ADHD positive parenting coach. So she says she helps burned out parents of children with ADHD remove the overwhelming self-doubt and powerlessness of raising their child so they can reconnect with them, rediscover their joy of parenting, and set their children up for success. And I just love this description of Shelley. And she has this incredible book called As Is, Accepting, Forgiving, and Empowering Your Child with ADHD and Yourself. And that really explains a lot about the conversation that we had together. Shelley explains her journey with her children, who two of which have ADHD and neurodiversity, and what that was really like for her. When I asked her what her dream is in her bio, this is what she said. Poet Kalen Dion says, encouraging someone to be entirely themselves is the loudest way to love them. My big audacious dream is to transform the way we parent kids with ADHD, leading with this kind of acceptance, awareness, and compassion. I hope this will empower our kids to become strong, intentional, and insightful parents themselves, and that this love will ripple outward to touch their children and so on from generation to generation. So if this is a topic that really intrigues you, please do stick around and have a listen. Hi, Shelley.
Hey, Mel, how are you?
Really good. It's so nice to have you here on Permission to Be Human, the podcast, and to really dig into what your big audacious dream is, but as well as I know what our topic is today. Our audience will have known from just our little intro there. But this is neurodiversity is everywhere around us. And I think that we're all people in the end, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation around that and around, you did the positive psychology stuff, same as me. So I'm always excited to have guests on with knowledge of that. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. It's a joy to be here, and I love talking about this stuff too, so I'm happy.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about who is Shelley.
Yeah, it's funny when I think about that, the first thing that comes into my mind is I'm a mom. I'm a mother. That's like, and yeah, that's where that's like my greatest joy, my proudest, it's not an accomplishment, but my greatest joy is being a mom and a wife, and I'm a new nana. I have a grandbaby who is 4 months old now, and that's a whole other level of joy, honestly. So that's kind of where I always start. I'm also a writer. I just published a book, as you mentioned, and I'm a parenting coach and a positive psychology practitioner. And the beauty of sort of all these things, I'm 59 years old now, so I'm not 20. And I've kind of, it's all, my whole life has coalesced really into this moment in my life where all the things of who am I are all finally coming together, which is a very, very beautiful feeling.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to put it, right? Like, yes, we're all these labels, but then it's like what's underneath that just starts to make sense a little bit more, And it
Yeah,
sounds like that's what's happening for you.
absolutely. It's like, it's a clarity. It's the gift of hindsight, of course. I just had all my adult children just all came in to, I live in Montreal, and they were all here from the United States with their partners, and everybody was sitting around the table, and I just sat back and I looked at these beautiful human beings. When my son just having a baby, like it's all continuing, and I thought, like, this was my dream. This was my dream. The table was so tight, we didn't have one extra room. We had to take out the big chairs and put in the folding chairs so everybody could fit. And I thought, this has always been my dream. Even before I
Yeah.
had children, honestly, that was the dream, was a full table. And then I want to extend the table, and I want it. And so I'm feeling very happy today, and with a lot, like I said, of clarity, that this was my purpose. This is it. And it's all kind of come together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just picturing this beautiful full table, and soon to be, by the sounds of it, the grandkids are starting to come. You're gonna have the little kiddie table somewhere hiding in there as well, right? So where do you squeeze them all in?
I know. So I was saying the big
Yeah.
challenge is I don't want to have a separate kiddie table. I want to find a way to connect the kiddie table to the big table,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Because I want everyone together. And so that'll be the challenge over the coming years, a good challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really beautiful. And I think it's really interesting in there because you said this was my purpose. This was the dream that I really wanted to do. And you're there with that. So where does that leave you in the world of like dream and purpose?
Yeah. Wow. What a great question. You must have a podcast. It's interesting because I've been thinking, like, what's the big dream now? And I think it really is a dream of from generation to generation. And the book that I wrote is for parents raising children with ADHD. And it's called As Is: Accepting, Forgiving, and Empowering Your Child with ADHD and Yourself. And it's really about raising your kids to know and cherish who they are, who they came to us as. It's not who we wished they had been, who we dreamed they'd be, all these things. It's who they are. And so my big dream is, if I can transform or impact this generation of parents, which are really now my children, because they're
Mm.
24 to 28 years old, if I can transform and impact them now, then they can raise children who accept themselves more as they are. And then they can raise children who accept themselves as they are. And from generation to generation, that's my big, as you say, my big audacious dream, is
Yeah.
to have that multi-generational impact. And the big dream is to have schools adopt a lot of these philosophies as well, because our kids spend sometimes more time in school than they do at home, and teachers have such an impact on our kids. And that's what I wish for, and that's the purpose of this book. And that's why I want to get it into as many parents' hands as I possibly can, because even though ADHD is in the title, I realized in rereading it many times that it's not so much a book about ADHD. It's really about raising kids to believe in themselves, whatever they are. And all our kids are different, and all our kids in some way or another are out of the box, and all our kids come to us as they were supposed to come to us. And it's our job as parents to help them uncover their strengths. And I don't say discover, I say uncover. They're already there, right? Uncover their strengths, find what makes them light up, find what brings them joy. This to me is our role as parents. And then send them off with this sort of foundation and basis of confidence into the world.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, yes, like that's the dream. That's your dream. And I'm like, that's the dream for every parent almost, right? Is to really be able to have our kids accept themselves, believe in themselves, go out into the world and do whatever it is that they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Mel, I have this story. It's like right at the beginning of my book, and with your permission, I'd love to read it because it kind
Mhm.
of sets the stage. And if any new parents come to me for coaching, and they're really floundering and they're overwhelmed, and they don't, I start with this story because I heard this story at a lecture when my son Sam So I have 3 kids. The eldest is Sam, and he has ADHD and anxiety. And since he was my first child, I was really a newbie, an ADHD newbie. I was totally freaked out. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. And this was the first lecture I went to on the topic. And the lecturer read this story and it completely changed my view. So I'd love to share it. It's
Yeah.
called Welcome to Holland. And sometimes I cry when I read it. So when you're going to have a baby, it's like you're planning a vacation to Italy. You're all excited, you get a whole bunch of guidebooks, you learn a few phrases to get around, and then it comes time to pack your bags and head for the airport. Only when you land, the stewardess says, "Welcome to Holland." And you look at one another in disbelief and shock and you say, "Holland? What are you talking about? I signed up for Italy." But they explain that there's been a change of plans and that you've landed in Holland and there you must stay. "But I don't know anything about Holland," you say. "I don't want to stay." But stay you do. You go out, you buy some new guidebooks, you learn some new phrases, and you meet people you never knew existed. The important thing is that you're not in a bad place filled with despair. You're simply in a different place than you had planned. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there a little while and you have a chance to catch your breath, you begin to discover that Holland has windmills, Holland has tulips, Holland has Rembrandts. But everyone else you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a great time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you'll say, "Yes, that's what I had planned." The pain of that might never go away. You have to accept that pain because the loss of that dream, the loss of that plan is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you will never be free to enjoy the very special, very lovely things about Holland.
Mm, yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
That's so wonderful. I think for every parent, you know, it's not what we're told it's going to be. Like it's never going to be it. It's not Italy. But then when you go into kids who are even more unique and who took us off to Holland or Germany or wherever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, what really touches me is I've met a fair few parents who have kids who have uniqueness in them in terms of whether it's a disability or neurodiversity or whatever it might be, and there is this guilt about that feeling that you just described at the beginning,
Mm,
right? Because
yes.
we're grieving not going to Italy,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that that story is really beautiful because it touches on like that's going to be there, that's okay.
Yes.
And there's
Yeah.
tulips and windmills
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Exactly. And I talk about, there's a whole section in my book on forgiving, which is a little forgiving your child and
Mhm.
yourself, which is a little controversial. People have gone, "Forgiving? What do you mean you have to forgive your child?" And I talk about grief because and I know grief. I lost my mom when she was 52. I was in my 20s. I had breast cancer, lost my breast and everything to cancer. I had a miscarriage. Like I've grieved and I know the feeling. And there is grief involved here. And it's important to allow ourselves to feel it, not beat ourselves up over it, to forgive our children, perhaps. Maybe it's not like a word that feels so comfortable for some people, but that's how I look at it and say, like, I forgive you and you are you. And I forgive your teachers for not getting you. And I forgive my in-laws for not, talking to you the right way. And I forgive myself for being frustrated with you sometimes. And that forgiveness and
Yeah.
grieving is a part of that. And I think it's an important part of life and it's an important part of forgiveness and
Yeah.
freedom, really.
It really touches on that, the title of this podcast is Permission to be Human. And
Mhm.
that is the positive psychology that we've learned,
Absolutely.
right? And well, the word forgiveness may or may not land with the people listening to this. What we're touching on is the fact that that feeling, whatever you're going to call it, of not going to Italy
Mm-hmm.
is
Yes.
sitting in your body, right? And how do we let it go through? We can't push it down or it will just continue to be there.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the
yeah,
concept of accepting our children as is, the
yeah,
reason I have in the title "and yourself" is we have to accept ourselves as well in all of our, with all of our foibles and all
yeah.
of we're, because we're all unique, right? And I remember really a very rock bottom day in the life of my son, Sam, the eldest. He was in grade 4, and I was getting calls every day, every second day from the school. He won't sit down and he won't do this and he's not doing that and he's not doing his homework. And they called me in yet again. This time they wanted to see me. And I got to the school and I'm holding Sam's hand, and the school administrator is standing across from me. And I look at her and I go, "I think you hate my child." And she looks at the floor and she goes, "I think I do."
Mm,
And I decided in that moment that everything was going to change, because up until that time, I was trying so hard to fit him into the model of what the obedient student should be. And was all, I tried everything I could. And I thought, you know what? The problem's not with him, it's with me.
yeah,
I'm worried the teachers aren't going to like me, or I'm going to worry that judge me, or because they did. I mean, parents judged us, and they're like, "What kind of parents have a kid that runs around in circles like that?" Or what? And I just began to stop caring about
mm,
what other people thought of me or my children standing there in front of that school administrator. It was like the lowest and the highest moment all in one.
yeah, yeah. And what a gift and a strength for you to be able to say no, like that's not okay, and then make that decision that I am not going to care what other people think about my kid anymore. What I know is that I'm going to love him as he is, right?
Yes, yes. And it
Yeah,
didn't come without challenge.
for sure.
It's, and I'm sure every single parent listening to this podcast can relate to that. That
Yeah.
there are days, moments, hours, weeks, you name it, that are excruciatingly challenging. This book, I wrote this book to offer some support and say you are certainly not alone in that feeling. And here are some thoughts on it. Also, now that Sam and my middle son Alex, also ADHD and dyslexia. And funny story, my youngest Sarah is neurotypical, and her first full sentence at the age of 2 was, and she'd put her little tiny finger up in the air and go, "In a minute, in a minute." 'Cause I was always saying to her, "In a minute, in a minute." I was so busy with these 2 boys that were like so full of beans. So we kind of laugh about it, but it was really a family affair. It affected my marriage, it affected everything.
Yeah.
And so the book is to offer support and understanding and encouragement. It is really not a book about ADHD. It's really a book about compassion and connection, gratitude, all the ways that we can kind of ground ourselves when we're struggling, perhaps with our kids, and ways that we can help them also ground themselves when they are struggling.
Mm, yeah. Grounding ourselves in order to help ground them, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. It goes back to the cliche, of course, put your oxygen mask on first and then put a mask on your child. I mean, our kids are watching everything we do. They see a little twitch in our face. They become experts on us. And so if we can reflect confidence in them, like, "Oh no, I know you got this." They
Yeah.
see it in our face. We don't have to say it in our words. They
Yeah.
see it in our body language. They read us like books. So it's so important that we, like I said, ground ourselves and have perspective. And if you're a math genius and your child is terrible at math, let it go, because
Yeah.
they're going to find great passion in something else. And it's our jobs to help them find that.
Yeah. And I think what you're touching on there is it's our job to help them find that, but to do that, it's our job to figure out ourselves, right? It's our
Oh,
job to figure
yes.
out the dream. It's our job to figure out why we're upset because that dream didn't happen and it shifted. All of them, you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
and that happens no matter who our kid is, honestly.
Yep.
Um, and I think that inner work is where it's at. Like I can be grounded, I can control my emotions in that moment, and but as you say, they really know when you truly believe that
Yes,
they
they
can do
do.
something. My son the other days, he showed me something. Oh my gosh, he showed me some, I don't even know what, a sticker or something like that, right? He's 6 and he says, "Mama, look at this." I went, "Uh-huh." And he goes, "I know when you say uh-huh like that, that you really don't think it's very interesting." And I'm like,
Wow.
"Yeah, you're right,
Wow.
hon. I'm
Yeah. How
sorry."
old is
Like,
how old is he?
it's sort of interesting. He's
Yeah.
6. Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Like
Wow.
he does know that. And it was the simplest little sound. I was trying to like, still respond, but
Hmm.
I wasn't engaged. I barely looked at what it was. And it
Yeah.
wasn't interesting to me, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
But, it is that inner work of truly believing that in yourself, in the reality that's there. And
Hmm.
then that shows that you really believe in your kid and
Hmm.
the value of connection and all the things. For me in that moment, it would be the value of connection, right?
Absolutely. And I have the gift now of hindsight, which is why I wrote this book now, right? Because when
Yeah.
I was in the thick of things, I never could have written this book.
Yeah.
But since the kids moved out and went out on their own, I've studied. I studied at the ADD Coach Academy. I studied conflict resolution at Cornell. I've done, and of course the Flourishing Center, the certificate in applied positive psychology. And so I have now tremendous hindsight. And my kids are old enough now that they can reflect back to me what meant something to them and what was important to them. And both of my boys, Sam and Alex, were always out of the box thinkers. They never liked school. They didn't like teachers telling them what to think. And I don't mean to say that about all teachers, but there are some teachers that really just want to hear their own opinions sort of reflected back. There are also some amazing teachers out there. And so my boys decided, they're just under 2 years apart, and they decided to not go to university. And instead, they've always been very business minded. They've been selling things and doing things since they're 7, 8 years old, whether it's car washing or whatever it is. And they decided to start a line of men's skincare. They decided to start a business together. And we said, okay, my husband and I were like under the table. They sat us down. I remember it was a rainy, cold day. And they said, Mom and Dad, we've decided to leave university and we're going to start this business. And we're like, my husband and I are holding hands under the table, squeezing. And we go, okay, okay, what can we do? What can we do? How can we support you? And off they went. And they're at $30 million a year now of income in this business, and they were voted onto the Forbes 30 under 30 list for entrepreneurship. So it's with the hindsight and looking back, giving them the support, and it wasn't about giving them money. They raised their own money. It was just about saying, we believe in you, we hear you, we see you, we hear that this is the path you want to take, and we see that you're serious, and we will support you. And that made, now they're reflecting back that that made all the difference.
Mm,
But boy, at the time, and we're going back about 10, 11 years, at the time it was less fashionable than it is now. And more kids are now saying, I'm not going to go to university, I have a different plan. But back then it was a little way out of the box.
yeah.
And so it's nice to have that hindsight. And they encouraged me to write the book. And they
Hmm.
said, and they were so, everyone in my family was so loving. I say this was like a love letter to me because they all gave me permission to tell the story. with their real names, with real details. They, of course, approved everything that I published, but they said, Mom, this is your story. And you tell your story. And yes, you can use our names. And so the book is filled with very personal stories of true stories that are painful.
Yeah.
They're painful. And it's been hard for the kids to, like, none of them have read the book cover to cover because it's hard, it's painful. But I talk about how we got through it and how they're doing now and what their reflections are on it and my reflections are on it. Lots of lessons learned, you know?
Yeah. And that lessons learned part is important. And the gift of hindsight that you mentioned is important, right? Because let's use the example that I just gave, right? I could go beat myself up and think, well, I don't know how to make connection with my child. I guess that's it. He's going to grow up and just be disconnected and blah, 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 right? I can downward spiral that. Or I can say, oh, that's interesting. Forgive myself for it because I was doing 60 other things that also needed to be done in that
Mm-hmm.
moment
Mm-hmm.
or needed to be done, whether in that moment or not,
Sure.
and then go, okay, like, what's next? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And as you say, like the time when you were learning all of this, I'm sure you made tons of mistakes along the
Mm.
way,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
Because we
Every
do.
every day, sometimes many, many times a day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember this from the Flourishing Center, but the Hawaiian prayer or blessing, Ho'oponopono. Do you know that one?
Mm, yeah.
And it says, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Amen. And even if you have nothing to ask forgiveness for, it's this incredibly balancing and cleansing experience to say it
Yeah.
and to repeat it several times. It's very
Yeah.
beautiful. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Amen. And
Yeah.
it just brings the whole nervous system down,
Yeah.
because we're permission, we're just human and we're all doing the very best we can.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the question that's kind of on my mind, you touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious, like, what was it like to write a book? Because I'm sure that
Oh,
lots of our listeners are thinking maybe like that's something they want to do one day or they've tried or like, but what's it like?
sure, sure. The short answer is it's extraordinary. And for me, my goal was to finish it because I'm kind of known for having some very fabulous ideas that I do not take to their ultimate conclusion.
Mhm.
I was a baker for 3.5 years, and the next step was to rent out a big bakery and I was baking out of my house, rent out a bakery and hire employees. And I stopped. Like I get a little bit scared. And when things get too big, I think, and I stop. So when I got the idea to write this, and it doing the certificate through the Flourishing Center really encouraged me because we had to do a final project. And I said, I'm going to write the first chapter for my final project. So I did. And then I got some very supportive and loving feedback. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this and I need to finish it. Goal number one. And I wrote for 1 year. And I have sort of ritualistically would get up in the morning, take my shower, get dressed in real clothes because my office is at home, and sit down at my desk and I would research, 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 write, 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 write. And it took a year. And I worked with Live Life Happy Publishing with Andrea Seidel, who's wonderful. And she was extremely helpful in encouraging me to continue when I was losing hope that I could finish this book. And the feeling of it being finished and then seeing it printed I cannot put into words what that felt like. And like I told you at the beginning, this feeling of everything kind of coming together was this beautiful moment when I opened that box for the first time and opened it, and there were my books. And I just thought, like, it's all come to this. Everything I've ever done has brought me to this moment, you know. And 30 seconds before you and I started our conversation, my son, my 28-year-old son, Sam, tried to FaceTime me, and I texted, about to get on a podcast. And he said, "Good luck, Mom. I'm proud of you."
Aw,
You know,
yeah.
and I thought, like, it could have gone so many ways with him. It could have gone so badly. It just could have.
Yeah.
And if I'd stayed on that trajectory of, I want everyone to like him, I want everyone to like me, I want him to fit in with the whole world, he wouldn't be a Forbes 30 under 30. He wouldn't, I don't know that he'd be married with a baby, and he's like an amazing father. You got to see him holding this baby girl. And I look at him, and of course, as a mother, you'll see as your child gets older and older, you still look at them as though they're, 3 years old, because they'll always be your babies. And I look at this grown man with he's 6'4", with these big hands, and this little baby girl, and I'm like, it's incredible. So writing the book and looking back over our whole journey has been intensely enriching. I grew so much and learned so much from putting the whole story together, reflecting on it. And one other little piece that is kind of like, I feel like I need to say, is that I lost my mom before I had kids. She died of cancer when she was 52, and we were very, very close. And I've grieved her absence a lot. And when the kids were little and I was struggling with the ADHD and the schools and mean parents and all this, I would mourn. I wish I had my mother. Maybe she could help me, guide me, And I realized in writing and finishing this book how she is 1000% in me in the way that I parent, because she very much accepted me as I was.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it at the time, nor did I have a name for it. But I was different too. We're all different. I was into music and theater, and I went away from Canada. A lot of kids don't go away to university, but I wanted to go away to university, and that was a little out of the box. And she was very, in whatever way she could, was very supportive and loving. And so I realized in looking back that she is fully with me, even though she's not here. And that was, I write about her at the very beginning of the book because it just all came clear to me.
Yeah. It's beautiful. This word, the word that keeps coming into my mind that, funnily enough, is also very front and center on a sign in front of me, but I wasn't even looking at it, is courage. And practicing courage.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you first started talking, almost beating yourself up a little bit about, like, I have these big ideas, and then I get all excited and I start moving, and then I step back and say, nope, not right now. Right. And immediately when you started talking about that, and as your story went on, I was like, yeah, but you were practicing courage. You practice little step at a time, and you said, actually, like, I'm good right now. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important topic for all of us, right? Because I could say the same thing. I have so many limiting beliefs and stories for myself that I'm battling all the time, because I am the big audacious dreamer, right? And I'm sure that many people listening are as well.
Yes.
And then, it's easy to say, I'm not a finisher. That's the story.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Bleemin' heck, you finished a book, firstly, just saying. And along the way, each of those big ideas, you were practicing the courage, and that is finishing too. That is the steps along the way to get to this point where you finished a book.
Yeah. That's such a lovely, positive, growth-minded way to look at what I described. And I appreciate that, because I think I'm going to use the word courage in my mind to replace some of the other ways I've described myself over the years, you know. And to anyone listening who's like, oh, I wish I could write a book. Oh, yeah. I say, don't think of it as a book. Write a paragraph. Just
Yes.
write a paragraph, and then maybe write another paragraph. And so maybe you write a little 4-page story, or maybe you write something just for yourself or just for someone that you cherish to read, or like, you know, one step at a time. And that's truly how I raised my kids, was
Yeah.
one step at a time. Because when I started to worry, that's when things would fall apart. And to think about the future and what if and what if and what if this and what if that, and you can't control anything about the future. You just can't, no matter what your kids come to you with, you know.
Yeah.
And so the concept of being present and being in the moment, and one step at a time. And that's how I wrote this book, really, truly.
Yeah. And I think there's this, this is something I'm constantly reflecting on, is as a big dreamer and the futuristic, strength, it's okay to think big, to have all those big audacious dreams.
Mhm.
And then we get stuck in that middle space of like, yeah, but we don't think we're a finisher. We don't think it's not because we're thinking like 10 times bigger than the average person sometimes, right?
Yes,
And it's
yes.
hard to fill that gap from the tiny little, I call them laughable step we can take right now
Mm,
through to making this thing happen. And we think we have to actually start on step 50.
yes, yeah,
Mm. It's the
yeah,
little step, as you say, it's that
yeah,
little step.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'll put it out there that like I'm going to write a book one day. That's one of the big dreams. I just tell myself that, and like when I'm ready to start writing, I will start writing and
Yeah,
taking those tiny steps. I want to be on a TED Talk. Those are like my two things. And I'm like, but what am I going to write about? And I'm just going to let that be in the air. And as soon as that decision, it's not even as soon as that decision's made. It's like as soon as an inkling of an idea comes, then I'll start to write about that and see how it
yeah,
goes.
yeah. And
Uh,
when the time is right, because I'm
yeah.
sure your listeners look at you and go, "Oh, I would love to have a podcast, but I don't know how to do that. How do I get started?" And here you are with a podcast. So everybody's doing something
Yeah.
that
And that
somebody
took 4
else.
years to do, I'd like to point
Okay.
out, right?
Okay.
4 years of
Yeah.
me thinking I'm
Yeah.
going to have a podcast. I almost launched once, and then
Yeah. Yep.
it's
Yep.
not like it happens right away.
Of course. Yeah. I always
And
tell people.
actually, if we use that as an example, I had to rein myself back from what the big dream was in that. I just said, I want a podcast. Great. Okay. I love the idea of a podcast. This is the big dream. And if I think in too much detail right now, I'm not going to do it.
Mm,
So my first one was make a trailer, put it up.
yep.
And then 6 months later, I'm like, okay, like I have to do something with this. Start having conversations with people and record them. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of
Beautiful.
like, getting lost in the tech and getting lost in the SEO and what
Yeah.
am I going
Yeah.
to do and how am I going to build this? And, there's so many different things that if I
Mm.
did that, I wouldn't have gone into action.
Yeah, so that's a great lesson, of
Yeah.
doing things in small bite-sized pieces that feel right. I always tell my kids that like life is like a tree with its many, many branches, and no matter what branch you go up, there's always a new branch to go to, and then from there's a new branch, and where you are right now is where you were meant to be. Period.
Yeah.
And so no regret, no like and I learned a lot from my sons really in watching them. I mean, they've been building this business from when they were 17 and 18. They're now 27 and 28. And boy, were they examples of one step at a time, and they were told no 100 times and they never gave up. And like I learned a lot. I learn a lot every day from them.
Yeah.
And when I think about when I wrote this book and was remembering where we came from, I mean, my son Sam couldn't be in a carpool with other kids. He just couldn't behave well enough. And I look now at where he is, and I see that really, it's really about building their confidence, and helping them see that they are exactly where they need to be
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
right now, and where that's going to lead, just take a breath, confidence, one step at a time.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Super great question. The part I don't like and I'm kind of struggling with is the marketing of this book. I love writing, but now my mission is to get it in as many people's hands as possible, and not even so much because I want to make all this money, but I want to help as many people as I can. And that's a part I don't know very much about, and I'm learning. So that's kind of where I'm learning to swim right now. My other big dream is to write a children's story that goes with the book.
Mm.
That so parents read this book and they can then read the children's book with their child. So that's the next dream, I would say. I've started drafting some ideas, and I'm just like, right now I'm here talking to you. That's
Yeah.
that's what
Right.
matters
What's
today.
next is maybe a cup of tea. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us today. We always finish with one question, which is, what would you say is your top tip to the moms who are listening, or the people in a mothering kind of life who are listening and they have these big dreams? Maybe they want to write a book, maybe they, whatever it might be, but they have this diversity coming in, challenges coming into their life. What would you
Mhm.
say to them?
I have I have three that immediately pop into my mind. Okay, I'm going to go with the one that just came to my heart, and that's the power of yet. And the power of the word yet is, all you do is take something that you've told yourself you cannot do. Like I said, I don't know how to market my book. And I simply add the word yet. I don't know how to market my book yet. And it totally changes the tenor of that statement. It goes from down to lifting up and makes everything possible. So a child that says, I don't have any friends, you don't have any friends yet. Or a mom that says, I'm going crazy, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know what to do. You don't know what to do yet. And that perspective, that growth mindset, that can really help. I use it to this day all the time.
I love that. Yeah, I use it all the time too. My son gets really annoyed because I can't do this yet.
Yeah.
Stop saying yet. Right?
Yeah.
But that's
But
okay.
he'll
I don't mind him
remember.
being annoyed because it's getting inside his head. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's
Those
so
one. Yeah.
important. And the one that comes to my mind is like, relating back to our conversation and your journey that you were just describing is I haven't completed one of my big ideas yet.
Yet. Yeah. It
Right?
it all comes back to permission to be human, which is why I was so excited to be on this podcast, because I knew from the title of your podcast that we would be very like-minded, and I love that. And yet is about being human, being human. You know what? You're making me think of, do you know the poem The Guest House?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, please let me read it. Please let
Yes,
me read
please.
it. It's in the
Yeah.
book. It's written by Rumi, and it's perfect for
Yeah.
what we're talking about. It's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Mm, lovely. Yeah.
Isn't that
Each
beautiful?
and every one. They're not comfortable, but greet them as a guest. That's
Absolutely.
beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so if people would like to find you and or your book, where will they go?
They can find my book on Amazon,
And tell us the
and
title again.
it's As Is: Accepting, Forgiving, and Empowering Your Child with ADHD and Yourself. I found if you type in As Is with my name, Shelley Lippman, it usually pops up. Or you can go to my website, which is shelleylippman.com, and the link to buy the book is on there as well. And it's Shelley with an E and Lippman with 2 P's.
That's what I was about to say. That's great. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shelley.
Thank
I've
you,
read your
Mel.
book. I recommend that book. It is great as a parent in general and as a human, it's beautiful. So thank you for writing that, and thank you for showing up and doing what you do.
And thank you for everything that you do. You bring a lot of light to the world.
Thank you.
That is it, folks. This has been Mel Finlater on Permission to Be Human, the podcast. And I am so glad that you have joined us here today, and hope that you have taken away some tidbits that will help you go away, connect with your big, audacious dream, and make that massive impact in the world that you are dying to make. If you liked today's episode, please, please, please like it, share it. Think of one person that you think would also like it, and send it on over to them. Let's get this out there, and more moms feeling like themselves, inspired, dreaming big, and out there being them. Please do head on over to find me on Facebook with Permission to Be Human, or Instagram, or you can even pop me an email and say hello at permissiontobehumanalways@gmail.com. Say hello and let me know that you listened. What did you like about it? I would love to hear. If you didn't like it, I don't really want to know. Just kidding. You can share that if you want. I would love to know, however, who you are. Let's connect. Let's find out what you want more of. I want to hear from you, and I want to make it what would be useful to you. As always, remember that you have permission to dream big, permission to feel big, and permission to be you. You have complete and full permission to be human. For real, you do.